May 1945, Germany, a POW camp outside Heidelberg. Private First Class Thomas Garrett was searching a prisoner's belongings. Standard procedure. Weapons, valuables, contraband. He'd done it 1,000 times. The old man's pack contained almost nothing. A tin cup, a photograph, a worn leather Bible, and letters, dozens of them, tied together with a piece of bootlace. Garrett flipped through them. Same handwriting, same addressee on every envelope. He couldn't read German, but he could read the name at the top of each page. An American name. He brought them to his sergeant. His sergeant brought them to the camp commander. The camp commander read the first 3 letters with the translator standing beside him. Then he sat down heavily in his chair. By morning, the letters were on Patton's desk. This is what they said. Before we continue, make sure you subscribe. We tell the stories about World War II where the hardest human moments outlasted the fighting. The prisoner's name was Wilhelm Bergmann. 61 years old, former schoolteacher from a small town outside Dresden. He had been conscripted into a rearguard unit in the final desperate months of the war. He was not a soldier. He was a father who had been handed a rifle and pointed west. His son's name had been Ernst Bergmann, 22 years old, infantry, killed in combat near the Siegfried Line in September 1944. The American soldier who killed Ernst Bergmann was named Corporal Daniel Voss, 20 years old, from Dayton, Ohio. Wilhelm knew this because he had found the after-action report in his son's personal effects. The Army had been thorough. Names, unit, location, the paperwork of death. Most fathers receiving that information would have buried it or burned it. Wilhelm Bergmann had done something else entirely. He had started writing. The first letter was dated October 1944. 3 weeks after Ernst died, the translator, Lieutenant Aaron Shapiro from New York City, read it aloud to the camp commander, Captain Robert Ellis. His voice was steady at the start. It became less steady by the 3rd paragraph. The letter did not begin with rage. It did not begin with accusation. It began with a question. Wilhelm had written, "Did you know his name before you pulled the trigger? Did you see his face? I need to know if my son was a person to you in that moment or only an obstacle. I am not asking to condemn you. I am asking because I cannot sleep without knowing." Ellis stared at the translated words for a long time. Shapiro set the first letter down, picked up the second. November 1944. Wilhelm had written about Ernst as a child, the way he ran, the noise he made eating breakfast, the argument they'd had the morning Ernst left for the front, something small and stupid about a coat, and how Wilhelm had not said goodbye properly because he needed to believe that Ernst would come back and they would have time to fix it. He wrote, "I carry that coat argument like a stone. Do you carry anything like that? A thing left unfinished? I think you must. I think anyone who has been in a war carries those stones. I want you to know that I do not hate you for what they told you to do. I hate the machinery that put both of our sons in that field. You had a son in that field too. Every soldier is someone's son." Shapiro stopped reading. He looked at Ellis. Ellis said nothing. He was looking at the stack of letters. There were 43 of them. 43 letters. 8 months. Written to a man Wilhelm had never met, whose address he didn't have, who would never read them. Unsent. Every one of them. Ellis picked up the phone and called 3rd Army headquarters. Patton read the letters that evening. All 43. His aide, Major Davenport, brought them in translated form, each one in order, and Patton read them at his desk with the lamp burning past midnight. Davenport stood nearby and watched the general's face move through something that was difficult to describe. Not softness exactly. Something more controlled than that. something a man keeps behind his jaw when he doesn't want anyone to see it working on him. The letters had a shape to them, a progression. The early ones were raw, questions without answers, grief looking for a place to go. Wilhelm writing about Ernst's childhood, his laugh, the football he'd played in the street, the way he'd failed mathematics twice and his mother had cried about it while Ernst laughed. The middle letters grew quieter, more philosophical. Wilhelm had begun to write about the war itself, about what he now understood that he hadn't understood before. He had not truly believed what was being done in Germany's name. He had told himself the rumors were exaggerations. He had turned his face away because turning your face away was easier than what came next. He wrote, "I did not pull any trigger, but I did not stop anything either. I watched my country become something I didn't recognize, and I told myself I was only one man. I told myself that until my son was in a uniform. Then I understood that silence is also a choice. I am writing to you because you deserve to know that some of us understand what we cost you." The later letters were different again, calmer, almost like conversations. Wilhelm had begun to imagine Voss as a real person, had given him details, a family, a house, a life waiting for him after the war. He wrote to the imagined Voss with a strange intimacy, the way you write to someone you have known a long time. The final letter was dated April 1945, 2 weeks before Wilhelm was captured. He had written, "I do not know if you survived. I do not know if I will. But I want you to know that if you did survive, if you went home, if you are standing somewhere right now in your ordinary life, I am glad. Not because Ernst is less gone, but because enough sons have died. Go home, have children, teach them what this cost. That is the only monument any of us can build now." Patton closed the folder. He sat in the quiet for a long time. Then he said to Davenport, "Find Corporal Daniel Voss." It took 11 days. Voss had been discharged 2 months earlier. A leg wound at the Rhine crossing. He was back in Dayton, Ohio, working at his father's hardware store, trying to sleep through the nights, which he mostly couldn't. A military telegram reached him on a Tuesday. The officer at the desk handed him the translated letters. Voss sat in a small government office in Dayton and read 43 letters from the father of the man he had killed. It took him 2 hours. The officer left him alone, brought him coffee, didn't ask questions. When Voss set the letters down, his face was the face of a man who has been handed something he has no idea what to do with. He said, "Is he still alive?" The officer said, "He's in a camp outside Heidelberg. He's well." Voss was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "Does he know about me? Does he know I read these?" "Not yet. General Patton wants to know if you're willing to meet him first." Voss looked at the stack of letters. He said, "I don't know what I would say to him." The officer said, "That's all right, neither does he." The meeting was arranged for a Saturday in June 1945. A room in the camp. Simple. 2 chairs across a table. An interpreter present but instructed to stay quiet unless needed. Wilhelm was brought in first. He had been told only that someone wanted to speak with him. No name, no explanation. He sat down. He was thin from months of poor rations. His hands, the hands of a man who had spent 40 years teaching school children, were folded on the table in front of him. Then Voss walked in. Wilhelm looked at him. A young man, limping, dark circles under his eyes, a face that had not yet settled back into peacetime. The interpreter told Wilhelm this man's name. Wilhelm was very still for a moment. Then he said something in German. The interpreter translated quietly. He said, "You are younger than Ernst was." Voss sat down. He didn't know what to say, so he said the first true thing he could find. He said, "I read your letters, all of them. I didn't know he had a name until I read them. In combat, you don't know names. You know directions and distances. I want you to know I understand what that costs now. I didn't know it then." The interpreter translated. Wilhelm listened. He said, "Did you have an argument with someone before you went to the front? Something unfinished?" Voss looked at him. "Yes. His younger brother. Something stupid." He didn't say what. Wilhelm nodded slowly. He said, "Ernst and I argued about a coat." They sat with that for a moment. 2 men in a coat and a rifle and everything between them. Wilhelm reached into his pocket. He placed something on the table. A photograph. Ernst in his uniform before deployment. 19 years old in the picture. Grinning, the way young men grin when they don't know what's coming. He pushed it across the table to Voss. Voss looked at it for a long time. He said, "He looks like someone who was good at football." Wilhelm made a sound that was almost a laugh. He said, "He was terrible at football. He just never accepted it." Something shifted in the room. Not forgiveness exactly, not absolution. Something quieter and more complicated than either of those words. Voss reached into his own jacket pocket. He had brought something too. A letter of his own, written the night before. He hadn't known if he would give it. He slid it across the table. He said, "I couldn't sleep either. I wrote some things down." "You don't have to read it now." Wilhelm looked at the envelope. Then he folded it carefully and placed it inside his coat against his chest. He said, "I will read every word." Patton was not in that room. He had arranged it, driven it, insisted on it over the objections of 3 separate officers who told him it was irregular, inappropriate, a waste of resources, a complication. Patton had told all 3 of them the same thing. He said 2 men are carrying something that will destroy them if they carry it alone. My job is to take care of my soldiers. This man carried that rifle for me. The least I can do is find him someone to set it down with. After the meeting, Patton received a brief report from the interpreter, a summary of what had been said. He read it, set it aside. His aide asked him what he thought. Patton was quiet for a moment. Then he said something that Davenport wrote in his private journal that night and never published until after the war. He said, "The fighting is the easy part. A soldier can be trained to fight in 16 weeks. 30 years isn't enough to train a man to do what those 2 just did in that room." He didn't say anything else about it. Wilhelm Bergmann was released in the general prisoner amnesty of late 1945. He went back to what remained of Dresden. He returned to teaching when the schools reopened. He kept Voss's letter in a wooden box on his desk for the rest of his life. Daniel Voss went back to the hardware store in Dayton. He married in 1948. He had 3 children. He slept better, though never perfectly. He kept Ernst's photograph on the mantelpiece in his living room. His wife asked him once who the young man in the picture was. Voss thought about how to answer that. He thought about it for almost a full minute. Then he said, "Someone I owe something to. I'm still figuring out what." His wife looked at the photograph. She didn't ask again. Some things don't need a complete answer, they just need to be kept. In 1962, a letter arrived at the hardware store addressed to Daniel Voss. German stamps, Dresden postmark. Wilhelm had written again, one last time, not to a man he'd never met, to Daniel, whose voice he knew now, whose limp he remembered, whose face he could see clearly when he closed his eyes. He wrote, "I wanted you to know that I am well. I wanted you to know that I still teach. I wanted you to know that every year when I teach the war to my students, I tell them that on one side of every rifle there is a man trying to survive, and on the other side there is also a man trying to survive, and the only way any of it stops is if someone somewhere decides to put the rifle down first. I tell them that I know this because someone put it down for me. He did not sign it, father. He did not sign it, enemy. He signed it, Wilhelm, who is grateful. Voss read the letter standing at the counter of the hardware store, customers moving around him. The ordinary noise of an ordinary Tuesday in 1962. When he finished, he folded it carefully and put it in his shirt pocket. A customer asked him if he was all right. Voss looked up. He said yes. He said he'd just received a letter from an old friend. Patton never spoke publicly about the meeting he arranged, but the interpreter who was in that room, Lieutenant Aaron Shapiro, gave a long interview to a military historian in 1971. The historian asked him what he remembered most. Shapiro said, "The photograph." The moment Voss looked at that photograph, because you could see it happen in real time. The man he'd been trained to see as an enemy becoming a person, a specific, particular person with a terrible football record and a father who loved him. He paused. That's what Patton understood that a lot of people didn't. That the war wasn't going to be over when the guns stopped. It was going to be over when men stopped carrying it alone. He found two men who were both drowning in the same water and put them in the same room. He shook his head slowly. Most generals fight for territory. Patton did that too, better than almost anyone. But that day in Heidelberg, he fought for something harder to capture. He fought for the possibility that two men could sit across a table from each other and find, if not peace exactly, then at least company in the wreckage. That's a different kind of victory. And it doesn't show up on any map. What would you have done with those letters? Would you have wanted to meet the man who wrote them? Let us know in the comments below. And if you want more World War II stories, the ones that happen after the fighting stops, make sure you subscribe.